Dr. K, my biggest fear about therapy is my therapist judging me? Here's the surprising answer. Yes, your therapist is indeed judging while you're in the therapy room, but not in the way you're thinking of. Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Koslowitz, YouTube's post-traumatic parenting expert. Today we're going to talk about judgment in therapy and how it makes us feel, how that can sometimes be a barrier to seeking therapy, and what to do about those fears. And that big number one question that people have, is your therapist judging you? And as a psychologist, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you the true, honest, real answer. Because anyone says that therapy is a completely judgment-free zone, is not fully telling you the truth. But first, click subscribe below so you never miss another episode and you get to hear the backstory of how your therapist thinks. We talk about all things therapy, trauma, parenting, and the intersection between them on this channel. So this number one fear, is my therapist judging me? Will my therapist judge me? If I tell my therapist all the things and I tell her what I'm really thinking and what really happened and what's really going on, will she judge me? And if she does judge me, does that mean that all the acceptance and validation and caring that I got goes out the window? Maybe I shouldn't risk telling her everything because she might judge me. Now, a lot of people will tell you that therapy is a judgment-free zone, right? There's no shame in therapy. It's judgment-free. It's a safe space. And they're not fully telling you the truth because therapists are human. And the human brain automatically judges. Now, does that mean your therapist is judging you in a judgmental way, saying like, shame, 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 you shouldn't have done that? No, that's not what that means. But your therapist is exercising clinical judgment at all times when you're in her office. So she might be judging the impact of a certain childhood story that you've told her and what the likely impact that it had on you. She might be judging the people who bullied you or harmed you or hurt you in the past, even if she's trying hard not to, right? She might exert judgment as to say, I know you don't really want to talk about this topic, but I have a feeling that if we talk about it, it's going to be really important for you to get you to where you want to go. Your therapist is always exerting judgment in the therapy room because that's what you're paying your therapist for. Sometimes it's clinical judgment. This person believes they have this condition, but in actuality, they have this condition. I need to help them see that. Sometimes it's practical clinical judgment. Should I continue pressing this? We're like very close to a breakthrough here. Should I press for the breakthrough? Or should I back off? Should I let them? Should I sort of force it? Should I sort of like say that unsaid thing in the room and open it up? Or should I let them come to it on their own? And depending on what type of therapy and where we are in therapy and what we're looking for in therapy, either option is possible. Should I bring up this unstated thing? There's 4 minutes left to the session. Maybe we won't open that door today. Maybe it's so important and we're so close, I'm going to open the door and mindfully decide to give her a couple of extra minutes to process it. Maybe I'm going to write a note to myself to bring it up first thing next time. That's clinical judgment. It's pragmatic clinical judgment, like we don't have enough time to go there, so we won't. Or we do have enough time, so let's go there. Or maybe you asked me last time to remind you that you really want to talk about this difficult topic. So here you are, it's the next week. Let's talk about the difficult topic, right? Your therapist is exerting clinical judgment at all times. But that does not mean she or he is exerting personal judgment, value judgment towards you and your worth as a human. Because when you've entered into therapy and you've started a therapeutic alliance with someone, part of that therapeutic alliance is kind of like the social media trend. We listen and we don't judge, right? We're going to listen non-defensively, non-judgmentally to everything that you're saying. And then I want to help you understand how you ended up here, right? I want you to understand the origins of this in your life story, in your psyche, in your background. I want you to fully understand where this comes from, this thing that you're struggling with. And very often, especially if it's an experienced therapist, it's probably not a heck of a lot that they haven't heard before in one form or another. So if you have this really shameful secret that you just don't want to share and you don't want to tell anyone because it's terrible, you've probably heard it before, or some variation. You don't always love spending time with your kids. Sometimes you fantasize about a completely different life that you didn't take. Sometimes you want to do something that's against the law. Sometimes you get so mad, you just want to lash out. Sometimes you feel burnt out. Whatever it is, it's really upsetting memory of this thing that happened to you when you were a kid that you still can't believe that ever happened, that you were dumb enough to like fall for it or be exploited in that way. Really embarrassing story about your family, whatever it is, your therapist has heard something that someone else finds equally as shameful and embarrassing. Your therapist is not judging you as a human. Your therapist is not judging your story, because part of that, of hearing your story, is really joining with you and seeing the world from your perspective. And everybody's a hero of their own story. There's nobody who wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be a bad guy today. I'm going to do bad things. Like, I just want to be destructive and hurtful and bad. Someone wakes up and says, I want to have a great day, and then a whole bunch of bad things happen, and they overreact, they get angry, they say that thing they regret, they, panic and handle something wrongly. Sure, that happens all the time. But no one wakes up in the morning saying, I want to be malicious and do bad things. So your therapist is going to help you see your story from your own perspective and help you understand yourself, help you interpret yourself to yourself. So that there's a lot of that deep validation of, it makes so much sense, given your life history, given what trauma has taught you, given the circumstances that you were operating under that moment, that you acted that way. Now, perhaps let's figure out if there's another pattern, if there's another way. Maybe there's another strategic way to handle this, and you and I can figure that out together. Maybe there's just another approach. Maybe maybe you're limited by certain outdated beliefs that just aren't true for you anymore. And I, as the therapist, I'm going to use my judgment, not of you, but of, oh, she doesn't get that. Like, she doesn't know that there's this thing called boundaries and she can set them. She doesn't know that it's okay to sometimes say no or get people mad, because she's never tried that before. So she's not even aware. It's sort of like someone's in jail and they never even tried the door of the prison. So they're not aware that the door is not locked and they can walk out at any time because they've never actually tried the door. So your therapist is exerting a lot of judgment while you're in therapy, but it's not judgment of you and your worth as a human. It's not judgment where she's going to judge you because she's hearing your story and like, oh my gosh. That will not happen. But your therapist might judge, oh, this person believes that when they're angry, they have no option but to explode and lash out. This person doesn't know that when you're angry, there are alternatives other than lashing out. Like, there's other things you can do. You can make your body feel better to make your brain feel smarter. You can take a break and take a pause and think it through and then react tomorrow. You don't actually have to react in the moment. This person doesn't know that. That's not judgment of their worth as a human. That's judgment of a skill and a perspective and perhaps a reframe that they need to learn to get where they want to go in life. So there's a lot of judgment in therapy. So when people tell you therapy is a judgment-free zone, that's not entirely accurate. Therapy is not a judgment-free zone. There's a lot of judgment, but the judgment isn't of you. The judgment might be of what you need to learn. The judgment might be of based on all of these patterns, it kind of makes sense that this person is the way they are. The judgment might be of what is the best therapeutic approach and therapeutic technique to help this person deal with this challenge. The judgment might be of, what can this person tolerate in any given session, and how stressful should therapy be given their history and given who they are and given how they tend to react to stress, right? There's all that kind of judgment. But the judgment is never of you as a human. The judgment is never of your story as though like, oh gosh, yeah, that's bad. Sometimes the judgment is of, am I the right therapist to help this person through this challenge? Like maybe I know that this person needs a certain treatment approach that I don't do. I am, well known that in my practice, there are some conditions I don't treat. I don't treat full-blown eating disorders. I don't treat substance abuse. The reason for that is I am not the best therapist for those conditions. Not because I have this like judgment of like, oh, you abuse substances, you are just like way too evil, way too not okay, way too below my practice. But simply, I don't have that expertise. I don't have the level of support that you would need. I don't have enough training in that area. And the same thing with eating disorders. It's not, oh my gosh, you have an eating disorder. Whoa, no, that's not what the judgment comes from. The judgment comes from eating disorders is a very specific specialty. You need a lot of training and you need a lot of dedicated supervision and experience before you would treat an eating disorder in private practice. I don't have that expertise. I don't have that training. I don't have that skill. So I am not the best therapist for you, right? So that's judgment, but it's judgment of the therapist's skills and abilities and match. Is this a great match or is this not a great match? Because if this is not a great match, then I will judge that I am not the right therapist, not because I'm judging you, but because I'm judging my bandwidth and my abilities to be able to help you. So when people tell you therapy is a judgment-free zone, it's not entirely true. But the judgment is never about you as a human. It's never about your choices. It's never about the stories that you tell and the therapist, having some moral outrage about whatever you tell. If the therapist is doing that, they need some supervision and they need to learn how to like really handle their own, what we might call, secondary transference towards the patient. They might have to figure out how to, handle their own feelings about what the patient's bringing up. That's on the therapist. But the therapist will absolutely exert judgments on your behalf in so many different ways. And that's actually what you're paying for. You want that therapist's clinical judgment. You want that therapist's clinical expertise to know when to bring what up and which treatment approach to use and whether you're ready for something that's going to feel a little intense or if it should be saved for another time, or whether it's time to, terminate therapy because you've gotten as far as it makes sense to get given the amount of time that you have. All of that, that's what you want your therapist's judgment for. And of course, therapist is not infallible. It's not like your therapist makes a judgment like this treatment approach is not for you and you really think that it is and they're trained in it. Then you might push back and you might say, hey, why? What do you think might happen if we did that treatment approach? I really want to try it. And you can have that conversation with them. Just because they have clinical judgment doesn't mean their clinical judgment is the law of the land and the only way to do things and that they can't be challenged. Of course they can be challenged. And of course they can be helped out. Of course you can give them insights and feedback and you can ask questions and you can take charge of your own psychotherapy because that's what therapy is, right? It's a collaborative process. But never worry that your therapist is judging you, but also don't worry if you feel a sense of judgment in the therapy room that comes from your therapist judging whether or not you're ready for something, or whether or not a certain treatment approach is good for you, or whether or not to bring something up, or maybe you bring something up with your hand on the doorknob as you're walking out and your therapist exerts judgment to say, yeah, that sounds important. Our session is over now. I have a feeling if we start unpacking that, we're going to go way over time. The next patient might be here. That won't work very well for you and your confidentiality. So is it okay? Can we table this? And can we make sure to promise each other that we're going to bring it up first thing next time and we're going to talk about it? There's judgment there, but the judgment is not you're a bad person that you brought up this a hot button issue as you're walking out. You know, how dare you, don't do that, right? That's not what the judgment is. The judgment is, this is not a wise situation to unpack right now, given that the session's over. This makes sense to do next time when we start from a place of a lot of energy, not a lot of depletion. We're going to start with this, you know, when we're both fresh next session. So there's no judgment around you as a person, but there's judgment around whether or not certain approaches are wise. It's wise to talk about something. It's wise to handle something. Of course, if you feel judged in therapy, if you feel like your therapist is making some moral judgment about your worth as a human, and you're just getting that vibe, bring it up to them. You know, therapists are human and humans make mistakes, and sometimes you're not with the right therapist. And that's an important conversation. And how they handle that conversation will tell you whether or not they are the right therapist for you, whether they're willing to hear feedback and whether they're willing to work with you. And very often, those are the best psychotherapy sessions ever. When you give your therapist feedback and you say that you don't like something that your therapist did, and your therapist hears you and unpacks it with you and makes you feel really seen and valued and heard and understood, very often that's when therapy begins. That slight rupture in the relationship is when true therapy starts, because how your therapist handles that can be your signal for safety for the therapy. So don't be reluctant to tell your therapist that you felt judged if you did, because sometimes that can be a really remarkable turning point in therapy, or it's time to say goodbye. But either way, is there judgment in the therapy room? Absolutely. Are you being judged? No. If you're a post-traumatic parent and you found this video useful, please consider liking, sending, sharing, send it to a friend, let them know about the post-traumatic parenting community, because we grow one post-traumatic parent at a time. Please make sure to check out the post-traumatic parenting community on Instagram. It's at Dr. Kostel at Psychology. That's where the post-traumatic parents hang out. That's where you can DM me and ask your questions like, does my therapist judge me? If you want to hear my interviews with experts in the fields of trauma and parenting and post-traumatic parenting, you can find the Post-Traumatic Parenting Podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, I have a newsletter called Post-Traumatic Parenting. There's a theme here. And finally, we have the Post-Traumatic Parenting book, hot off the presses. It's available for pre-order now. You can get it at broadleaf.com. You can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get books. Till next time.